Yes,
Man.
this has truly been the Jimmy Neutron Brain Blast podcast.
The Brain Blast podcast.
Yeah.
Rebrand.
No.
Okay, last but not least.
Okay.
Or are you ready?
The temperature.
You need some more time.
The temperature will not drop because
okay.
it's time for Montreal. And it's Valentine's Day. It's a day to be a hopeless romantic. There's a young man out there who had very strong feelings in his teenage years. He had posters on his wall. He had dreams. Didn't even want to think about what if we could connect, make it work. I'm talking about Sidney Crosby,
The kid.
the Montreal Canadien.
Wow.
So here's the timeline, okay? A bunch of you are going to be like reporting for disinformation the second that came out of my mouth. But listen to me. Last summer, everyone on the hockey subreddit, on Twitter, on YouTube was saying, here's the place Taylor Hall's going to go and here's why. And we had our big brains and we were deep in the mind of this player. And you know where he goes? Buffalo.
Yeah. Like
Buffalo. So all of you
more wrong.
Right. All of you out there saying Sidney Crosby's never going to, you have no idea. Wayne Gretzky got traded. Sidney Crosby is facing a reality where Brian Burke is in charge of his future.
Brian Burke, who famously has said on Sportsnet and been berated for saying that this team is not in its window, gets hired as the president of hockey ops for Pittsburgh. And
say, if you had to put your future in someone's hands in the world of hockey, how low on your list would Brian Burke be? I'm not trying to disrespect his backstory, his knowledge, but someone to make the calls right now, he's not near the top of my list. That's a debatable point, but what is not debatable is the fact that Pittsburgh has a very flawed roster. I'm sure Sid is frustrated already at how the last few years have gone in the playoffs. Evgeny Malkin is expiring. They tried really hard to get Marc-Andre Fleury back, and they could not. What are the bright spots on this roster other than Sid, Gino, Gensel? Like, you've got some young, fairly promising defensemen, but I'm just saying it's Valentine's Day. Let's dream a little bit here. It is, if you're going to say that it is, you can't make a case for why Sid would request a trade, then that's just, you're being unreasonable if you're saying that there's no case to be made.
Right.
There's a case to be made, and it's very strong.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it's going to happen, or I'm not even saying it's likely, but I'm saying there's a strong case to be made for Sid wanting to leave. And if he wants to leave, that organization is going to do right by him. Their priority is going to be, let's reset, but also, this guy matters to us. He matters to our fan base. Let's put him somewhere he wants to go. And he had Montreal posters on his wall growing up. There's pictures of him in Habs jerseys as a kid.
And yeah, he played for Rimouski in Quebec in the Q. So yeah, there's certainly more and more that we can dig for.
And let me explain why
I'm bullish. Go on, but I might have a rebuttal after.
Okay, I'll explain why why Sid would be interested from a hockey perspective. So first of all, the Habs have a bunch of cap space coming up. I think this is an off-season move, by the way. I don't think this is a mid-season move.
Oh, okay.
I think this is after what's going to happen, which is the Penguins have a couple signs of life in the off-season and just stumble and fall in some way at the end of the season. It's going to be an embarrassing playoff loss or something like that. It's just going to happen. Yeah. I would put you could pick a household plant in this living room and I'll eat it if the Penguins have a positive playoff run. And clip this because I'm confident in it. But Montreal, watching them right now, sometimes This is not my quote. It's from a guy, I think it was a TVA reporter, and I apologize for not having the name offhand, but sometimes they play Corsi, not hockey. And one of the reasons for that is, look, I'm a big believer in Kotkaniemi, but he is not able to assert his will in the game yet.
Right.
Suzuki is a kid, and he can't do it alone, but he's been one of the few bright spots on offense. Danault is just plain bad in the offensive zone. That guy is probably kicking himself for not taking his big payday because the only reason he produces offensively is just volume of chances. His actual offensive toolkit is straight up bad. And so Montreal right now hasn't been able to consistently produce offense through the middle of the ice. And that's where, if you can't do that, you can't produce offensively consistently.
Yeah.
And if you can add Sidney Crosby's dynamic, like he's good on the forecheck, he's good in the cycle, he's good on the rush, he's good everywhere. Like it's Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
If there was a team, if I was to pick one team out there who, no matter who you have to give up in return, adding Sidney Crosby, who can A, fit him cap-wise, but B, become an instant contender from adding him to the lineup, no matter who you have to give away, it's the Habs. If you add him to that team with the depth, incredible depth they have on forwards, defense, their size, their speed, the goaltending, there's no other team out there who is who adding Crosby, as good as he is, would just instantly launch them into the stratosphere as far as cup contenders go. So if he wants to win another cup, I'd argue that Montreal could make a case for being the most appealing place to try and win one more. Because Bergevin has said he wants to win while Weber and Price are around and doing well. Like, the whole organization, he fits with the timeline, he fits with the plan. They have young assets that you could give up for a Crosby. They have cap flexibility with contracts coming off this offseason. I'm not saying it's likely, but if we're dreaming, you can make a case, and I think it's fun to make a case. So that's my spice.
I think they need to make that happen before the expansion draft, which can be something to look forward to, our discussion about that down the road. But yeah, you don't want to lose some of your assets, right? Or you don't want the chance of making or breaking a trade by losing someone to Seattle who ended up being a key piece in maybe who Pittsburgh valued. So
for sure.
So there is definitely a case for that. I mean, it's got to be tough. So yeah, I don't want to like speak out of both sides of my mouth. Like, it feels like I've maybe done a couple times on this podcast, but like I've talked before about like how long can the players in Chicago restand, like a retool, really a rebuild. Well, I've been skeptical, but a guy like LeBrun has brought up a really interesting point. And maybe I'm speaking in generalities, but Crosby for sure has this air of, I think, loyalty and dedication to him. I think it comes on and off the ice. There's a lot of things, a lot of stories about Sid off the ice that are just like actually amazing, that he's done for others and other groups of people. And someone who kind of like parallels that air on Chicago is Taves, where he has a lot of like dedication and loyalty. And yes, he's dealing with injury and issues like that. I can't speak to that. I don't know, when they were describing some Taves issues, he's kind of sounded like he got Lyme disease. He's a native of Manitoba. It's pretty prominent here. That's what I thought, but we'll see.
How many times have you had Lyme's disease?
Twice for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cam spends a lot of time in the bush, and you get Lyme's disease from deer ticks. So, and I know Taves, doesn't he like hunt or fish? Like, right. He owns farmland near where we live. Actually, like he's an outdoorsy man. Yeah.
So I don't know. That was kind of like my take on it. But anyways, like going back to Pittsburgh, like Crosby's got a really loyal. Now, if there's a scorched earth rebuild, that would be kind of ironic because how can you have a scorched earth rebuild without giving up Crosby? But like if all his buddies Letang and Malkin are gone, it might be this. Do I really want to stay around? But like a guy like Lemieux played on an awful Pittsburgh team, and then they drafted Crosby, and I feel like there's a pattern or succession there where maybe Crosby plays with the next Crosby in a couple of years from now, right? Lemieux traded off to Crosby.
Who will be from Latvia.
Yes.
Call back, go watch that video.
Yes. So
I have something to say about that, though.
They could get rewarded in the long term, for Crosby being dedicated to the franchise. And I'm a little suspicious. And here's... Okay, I'll let you jump in first because I'm going to go back to my...
Couple things.
My point.
Penguins don't get Crosby without the lockout.
Fair.
You can't count on that happening again.
Fair.
Crosby knows this because he was the guy drafted in the,
Yeah.
Number two, if that lockout doesn't happen, this is fairly well documented. Lemieux was a part owner of the Penguins while he was playing for them.
Yeah.
He was this close, and it probably would have happened, if not for the lockout, to putting the Penguins in escrow and accepting a deal to the Montreal Canadiens.
Oh,
interesting. It was this close. And
here come the Canadiens again.
Exactly. Yeah. You're right. There's pattern, and it was so close last time, and there's no lockout this time to bail out the Penguins. So it's almost like the fulfillment of what the Habs missed out on of Lemieux. It's so poetic, and it's
interesting.
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, I'm going to go back to stifling maybe some of these dreams, because a lot of the players that I think we have seen leave teams who have been so loyal to their teams are players who have not won with their teams.
Yeah.
Going really far back, a guy like Alfredson.
Iginla.
Yeah. Mike Modano, was he after the Stars Cup?
I think he might have won.
Yeah, let's go with Iginla, Alfredson, Joe Pavelski recently, who's still put up Thornton, right? These guys haven't won, and so and consider this. This was a point LeBron made as well, is that the 2022 Olympics are coming up. If Crosby won gold for Canada, does that totally placate like his need or quench to win? You could argue no, but that could be a huge X factor in actually, like, there could be a real benefit to him going, and Canada looks really good, and there's a case to be made for other teams. But if they won gold, like, does that completely soothe his need to maybe win again at the cup level or at the NHL level?
Right.
And you can say no, and I think that's fair, but I think that can go a long way. That can have a resonating effect for several years for Sidney Crosby if the Team Canada won gold.
So hear me out, okay? I'm going on, forgive me for being on my phone, I'm going on a limb here, so I'm just kind of researching something. So Sidney Crosby won the Conn Smythe Trophy for both of their back-to-back cups. But there's an interesting part of the narrative where, guess who won it in 2009 for their first cup? It wasn't Crosby.
And it wasn't Fleury.
No.
Was it Gino?
It was Gino. So I don't know if any of our fan base crosses over to the NBA, but Kevin Durant is a guy who has asterisks beside his titles. Title? He just has one, right? He has two?
Yeah.
It's disgusting. I'm not saying Crosby has asterisks, but Brian Burke is on record saying that teams are trying to build their teams around the Pittsburgh model. Brian Burke is on record saying there is no Pittsburgh model. They got lucky. They got Malkin and Crosby. I'm not saying there's asterisks beside Crosby's cup rings, but how many players do you think in this generation are going to be able to make a case for being among the top few of all time? Ovechkin for sure for goal scoring, not as a player. Connor McDavid, depending on how his career goes, Cups, whatever, stays healthy, maybe. Crosby has a case for being up there among the greatest of all time.
Right.
But his Cups were with Malkin. And for one of them, Malkin kind of stole the Conn Smythe.
Right.
What would it do for his legacy? Again, an NBA comparable. People were hesitant to give LeBron. There's still, obviously it's debatable. Is he the greatest of all time? A lot of people say Jordan is the greatest of all time. That's not something I'm trying to get into. But a lot of people said if LeBron can go to a lot of this narrative of him being in the discussion for greatest of all time only happened because he didn't just win rings with Miami. He won a ring in Cleveland, and he went to LA.
That's just something. How
much does it add to a player's narrative and their case for being among the greatest of all time if they can leave this franchise where, LeBron played on a super team, Crosby has Malkin? What would it do for his narrative if you can go to the team with arguably the most frenetic fan base, who would just fight and die for anyone in their narrative? If he could bring a cup to Montreal,
right,
people are going to be talking about him as being like maybe the second or third greatest player of all time. That won't happen anywhere else.
Right.
And so maybe he doesn't have the hunger for just another cup, but maybe he gets up for that.
It's a legacy play.
Mm-hmm.
Not all legacy plays would necessarily work out. So I don't know what it means if he goes to Montreal and he doesn't win. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, obviously that's something that we can discuss, and you can say this could really add. I don't know. Like this whole Crosby has only done it with Malkin. Well,
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, I don't think there's asterisks. I'm not saying he did it because of Malkin. I'm not saying that he doesn't win cups if Malkin isn't there. I'm just saying for one of them, Malkin won the Conn Smythe.
Right.
And there's this understanding that it's always been Crosby and Malkin.
Yeah. People might fleece me for this analogy, but I mean, Gretzky won 4 in Edmonton with Messier, with Curry, with Kevin Lowe, who just made the Hall of Fame, right? With Grant Fuhr.
Do you mean Coffee or?
Coffee too. Lowe made the Hall of Fame.
Who's Curry?
Yari Curry.
Oh, I was still in NBA mode. I thought you mixed up Coffee and Curry.
Oh, no,
right.
no.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so when Gretzky left, Edmonton won. You're following with Messier. Messier also went and won in New York, and Vancouver fans don't want me to talk about Messier at all. I don't think Messier is in the argument for the greatest of all time.
Heck no.
Gretzky left, but what I'm saying is that I think over time that I don't think that narrative will stand the test of time. And now it's a social media age. It's different than Edmonton. There are other factors in this Edmonton example, but Gretzky left and never won. Messier stayed and won, and he left and won somewhere else. But yet we're not tarring and feathering Gretzky for being the best of all time. His numbers are bananas.
Exactly. That's the thing, though. Crosby doesn't Gretzky has the numbers. If he never won a cup, people probably still think he's the greatest of all time because his numbers. He has more assists than second place has points.
Right.
That's insane. I think in this comparable, I think that Malkin is Messier, where if Malkin goes somewhere and wins another cup, he's probably not going to be in the conversation for.
Right.
He's not going to be up there. Crosby, the way that he gets higher in this list, because he's playing in a different era than other guys in terms of putting up points, where he's just not going to be able to touch their numbers.
Right.
The early part of his career was basically still the dead puck era. Brodeur and the Devils were still good, I think, in 2005. Crosby is the only way he continues to ascend this ladder of greatest of all time is by winning more cups.
I guess, but then you have to ask yourself, how many players is he ascending on that ladder? And will that move the needle enough?
Right.
Is another question, because we're talking Gretzky, Lemieux, right, are going to be up there. You could argue Bobby Orr,
Gordie Howe.
Gordie Howe can be up there. So from a legacy standpoint, where is he among those? And 1 or 2 cups even going to be enough
Yeah.
yet to have the conversation?
Yeah.
While you research,
Yeah.
here's one thing that I find interesting. You said you didn't have very much confidence in Berkey, and that's okay. I respect that take. I think one thing that Brian Burke maybe doesn't get enough credit for is that his Toronto team that he made was actually not bad. It was really the Sagan trade that cost him, and yeah, that'll bring up some tough memories for Leafs fans. But this was also in an era where we didn't have conditional trades, right? We didn't have conditional first round picks like we've seen with Ottawa being able to retain for a year and taking Tkachuk and then deferring their pick, right? That didn't happen in Brian Burke's era with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So what happens if he does not get fired and that team that he got fired from in Toronto ended up making the playoffs that year? What happens if that was a conditional pick and they had Sagan and Kessel, right?
Yeah.
Like, we could be changing the conversation, and we've gone really far into what-if territory. So that's what's worth bringing up. The other thing I would add on top of that, we've talked about Berkey a lot, but Hextall is actually the GM, and Hextall has made, like, the evidence of Philadelphia right now, that is actually Hextall's team and design, and he essentially got fired because he wouldn't bring up Carter Hart too early. He decided that I know Philadelphia needs goaltending. I am not willing to pay the prices for goaltenders that are not worth as much as they're being advertised on the market, and I'm not willing to hurt Carter Hart's development by bringing him up, and that ultimately cost him his job. But that team now, what they've been able to do in the way that he's been able to retool with Giroux and Voracek, with a lot of players. I know some, we didn't talk about Konechny rumors that came up. I think we'll let those go by for the sake of today's podcast. But like, Hextall has done a lot, putting his fingerprints, really good free agent signings and acquisitions with Jimmy Hayes, who's been really proving doubters wrong. James Van Riemsdyk is one of the top scorers in the league, which maybe some people scoff at, but this guy was a second overall pick, right? Yeah. Like, they've done a lot, if with good drafting, development, and acquisitions.
Yeah.
And if you consider that Burke analogy from Toronto, the Hextall analogy from Philadelphia, and you look at Pittsburgh, no, they don't have the same amount of runway, but I think there's a very reasonable case to say that these two are absolutely the right people to hire for the job. If you are going to choose to go down a runway where you are keeping Crosby and Malkin, they're the guys to have. If you're choosing that the runway is not long enough and you need to grab different assets and you need to overhaul your identity, and I think these are still both the correct people to hire in either way. So that's my rebuttal to maybe some of things that you've been saying.
I think I completely agree. They're the guys to hire for a retool. I think that they're the guys to hire if you sell Malkin and Letang but keep Crosby.
Right.
But I don't think, like, those teams are great, but they never won anything. And I'm sure, like, obviously if we can go back, they have Sagan, they have Kessel, who knows. But I would say that they don't have the runway. You don't have time to draft and develop people unless you're getting, like, early picks in the first round. And next year is Malkin's last year. I don't think there's any way Malkin stays on that team unless something crazy happens. And I don't think these are the GMs to like, if you have a year or a year and a half, these are the guys who I want doing the job if I have 3 or 4 years, which maybe Crosby sticks around by then, but he has concussion issues. Who is he at the end of those? I'm not wishing anything like that on him, but so I hear what you're saying, and you're totally right. I should have given Burke more credit, but if I'm Crosby and it's like, okay, realistically, they have a year and a half to make something happen. I'm not sure that anyone can, with the assets that Pittsburgh has right now,
or doesn't
to
have.
trade. Exactly. I don't know that there's a way that they become competitive in that time frame. And so if Malkin's gone, I'm not saying I expect it. I'm just saying there's a case to be made for him saying, you know what, let's move on. And so you asked about greatest of all time. Lemieux won 2 cups as a player. I think that if Crosby goes to Montreal or somewhere else that has a big fan base, if he can go to like an original 6 team, I think if he wins 1 more cup, he is now, the conversation is him or Lemieux. I think he passes Bobby Orr. I think he passes Gordie Howe. And if he can win 2 cups, I think it's Gretzky and then it's Crosby. Obviously, we can go back and say what happens if Lemieux is healthier.
Bobby Orr is healthier.
Right, exactly. Then this conversation isn't happening the same way. But
Gordie Howe just played long enough.
That's the only reason really he's up there in my opinion.
Well, let's not offend anyone, but yeah.
I still think he's up there. He's just not up there if he doesn't have the longevity factor, like in terms of being in the top 5 of all time.
Yeah.
But I think that Crosby has a real shot at being the greatest player of the modern era and being the number 2 of all time if he can go put together a win or 2.
So, well, here's another thing that maybe quashes your dreams a little bit. But if Malkin only has a year left and he's more likely to be dealt, how do you feel if Malkin is the one who's a Canadien instead of Crosby? It doesn't have the same romantic effect, but is that not more realistic? And you were just describing all the assets that the Canadiens can give up to a team that would hold value, aka convince Crosby that maybe you can stay. What happens if Malkin is the one who is your number 1 center instead of Crosby? I think now other people can argue that the plausibility of Crosby going to Montreal is higher than the plausibility of Malkin going to Montreal, but I don't think so. I think it's a lot more likely that Bergevin is like, I'm not gonna wait and play games to see if Crosby's available. If Malkin's available, I'm going to get him, provided I'm allowed to talk to his agent and like we can lock him up, make something happen, right?
So here's my thought. Bergevin is good friends with Lemieux. They played together on the Penguins. If Crosby gets moved, it's not by fielding the market. It's through something like a situation where Bergevin calls Mario and they're like, I'm not trying to be pushy. I'm not trying to offend. I just need to ask out of respect for Sid. Is there any way? I think that's the sort of thing that leads to a Crosby trade. I think Malkin kind of goes on the trade market. And this is no longer relevant to the Canadian division. But if Malkin's available, Colorado.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. I love it.
That's just the thought I had.
That'd be good.
Because I think they're in a place where Montreal could only give up those assets if they're getting a guy who they know they have for more than a year.
Yeah.
Colorado, it's not quite the same.
Right.
So this has gotten wild.
I didn't even talk about your boy Anthony Mantha being scratched. Healthy scratch the other night. But
I told our friend to pick him up for his fantasy.
I think it was a one-off. Yeah. It's just communication.
This has been... we're working at keeping it shorter. Obviously, we have not succeeded, but I hope you enjoyed. If you... I'm going to cut this out because I didn't have anything else to add to that train of thought, but I'm going to restart the close. Do you have anything you want to say before we close?
Knock that like button loose.
Oh, yeah. So, hope you enjoyed. Thanks a lot for checking us out. We've got lots of clips and some kind of one-off videos of our channel. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Thanks.